do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all around the world. Yasir Qadhi was right. Yasir Qadhi was right. This would be disastrous to say this in public, and hijab just kept pushing, and now it's kind of too late. All right, Jay, where were you?
Before we get into the interview, I want to show you why Mohammed Hijab had to ask this question. This is not something that's just come in the last few days. This actually began about 4 years ago. And I sent you the clip, and I'd like you to put up the clip if you could. Look and see. Now, before we put the clip up, I want to give some background to it. And I don't know if all of you know who Hatun Tash is. If you don't know, get to know her. This is a real warrior of God, and I have never have more privilege than working with this lady. This lady is absolutely amazing. She's from Turkey. She used to be a Muslim. She now lives in London. And I've known her for about 8 or 9 years now. I got to know her because I was teaching her in Oxford at the Oka Center of Apologetics there. And she was my student, and she thought I was very arrogant, which a lot of people think I am because of the way I come across. And so I remember that while I was in one of our talks there, I said, listen, I'm down at a place called Speaker's Corner every Sunday. If any of you want to come down and join me, you'll have a great time down there. So she came down and never stopped coming. I mean, she got hooked the first Sunday she was there, and she's still down there. Now it's lockdown, of course. We're in pandemic, so she's not there these Sundays. But when she started coming down, we brought her on to Pfander, and so she was a member of Pfander, which is our organization, and she did a trip down to Morocco. She went down to Morocco to do a trip there to do some teaching, and she needed to get a Quran. So she just walked into the first bookstore she could find there in the marketplace and asked them if she could have a Quran. And they said, well, which Quran do you want? She says, what do you mean? Just any Quran. Well, which one? Do you want Hafs? You want Warsh? And they said, what do you mean Hafs and Warsh? I thought there was only one Quran. They said, oh, no, there's quite a few different ones. We have about, I don't know the whole dialogue, but he said there are numerous ones that we have here. She said, well, give me the first one you have. What's the most popular one here in North Africa? They said, here, the Warsh. So she took the Warsh, and she came home back to London, and then she now listen, this woman doesn't even speak Arabic. She's not Arab. She's Turkish. She's never had Arabic. But all she needed to do was put the two Qurans side by side. And then she just went from page to page, and she just compared what the two Arabic words said. And she saw, well, this word looks different than this word, or this phrase looks different than that phrase. And so she circled them, and then she went back to her Arab friend, and she went back to her Arab friends there in London and says, is this the same? She said, no, that's different. No, that says different. And they would translate to her what the difference says. And then she realized these are completely different words. These are completely different verses. These are completely different meanings. In some cases, these are completely different theologies. And she came to me about it and says, yes, well, I do this. We heard this in seminary. I remember hearing this under Dudley Woodbury, that this was a problem. But I had never really done what she had done. And really, no one had really done in our experience. I didn't really come across who had someone who had done it. So she started sending out the message to all her friends all over the North Africa and in Morocco and Yemen and Jordan to ask them to go to the local bookstore and look. And she started getting all the different names. So she said, I want Nafi, I want Ibn Kathir, I want Abu Binir, I want Ibn Amir, I want Asim, Ibn Ali Abi al-Najud, I want Hamza al-Zaklat, I'm looking for al-Kisai, I want Abu al-Jafar, I want Yaqub al-Yamami, and I want Khalaf. Those are the 10 major ones. She wanted to look for those 10 major ones. And then she started getting them. They only cost a few dollars. You can buy them in all these bookstores. These are not in the Nile River like what the Muslims thought they would. The ones that were in Cairo were thrown into the Nile. You cannot get rid of these Qurans just by throwing them into the Nile back in 1924. And so she came across 10 of them, but she didn't stop there. Then she started getting ones named Qalun and Al-Bazi and Al-Duri, not just one Al-Duri, 2 Al-Duris. And then she finally came across, and she'd already had the Warsh, and she had the Kunbul, and by the time 2015 rolled around, 2016, she had 26 of these different Qurans, 26 of these different Qurans. And she was giving them to all her Arab friends, as many as she could, and they were looking and they were finding all these differences. And they were finding not a few differences, they were finding hundreds, not hundreds, thousands of differences. So we talked about it, and I said, why don't we take these down to Speaker's Corner? Let's just hold them up. Let's just go and see what would happen if we took these Qurans down to Speaker's Corner and held them up for people to see. So this is in 2016. Look what happened. And take a look and see who's there. I want you to look carefully to see if you see somebody you're going to recognize. Go ahead.
All right, here we go. Speaker's Corner 2016, ladies and gentlemen.
is only one Quran, right? And that every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie.
You run away from truth.
Okay, so there are two Qurans today, right?
More than two Qurans.
More than two? Three Qurans?
More than three Qurans.
More than three? Four Qurans?
There are approximately 26 of the Qurans.
26 different Qurans. Oh, go ahead, start throwing things out. It says they were lied to. Two different readings.
It's the same thing.
That's different. Look at it and which has the difference is between Papa and Dama. Read it. Read it again.
حتى يقول
Read it again. The prophets fought, but by the time you get to the fight, they were killed. That is a huge
attention. Don't give up.
Your faces, Muslim people, your face from here. Come.
You better go. We're going to make it more and more difficult for you.
Did everyone catch the Muslims there at the end calling everyone away from those 26 Qurans? Everyone, back up,
Who
because
was the tall man there? Who was it? Do you recognize him, David?
that was the mighty Muhammad Hijab.
He looks a lot thinner then, doesn't he?
Yeah, destroyer of Yasir Qadhi's career.
That was him in that crowd. And he was the one pulling all the Muslims away.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known Muhammad Hijab all that time, and we've known him for quite a few years. And he is about 6'5", maybe 6'8".
He's got. I'm 6'3", and he was towering several inches above me. So he is in the 6'7", 6'8" range. He's a giant.
When he comes and takes me on, I'm on the ladder, he's on the ground, and his face is right next to mine. I mean, that's it. He doesn't need a ladder. And we've done a few debates there. If you go up on Pfander Films, you will see a debate that he and I did, and he's just sitting there going like this, showing his muscles. That's about all he could do in that debate. It was on this very material. It was on this very thing that we're talking about right now. So that was in 2016. We went down 3 different times with those Qurans and held them up. The last time we went down there, we almost didn't leave the corner. They were so upset with us. They did not want us to leave with those Qurans. They tried to grab our bag. They broke the handle. Some of the young men followed us and were trying to get in the way from us leaving the corner. It was such a catharsis for them. They had never come across this before. And as I looked at these young men, you could see that they were having panic. They were having a crisis. And I suggest that Muhammad Hijab was in panic mode as well. He was having a crisis. And he has still been in crisis for 4 years. And that's why I can't prove it, but I think that's why he wanted Yasir Qadhi to put this to rest. Because 4 years now, no one has been able to answer the question that he couldn't answer back then in 2016. He had to pull them out of the crowd. He had to say, come to me, come to me. What would he have told them? What would he have showed them? You notice they tried to pull the papers from our hands where we were giving side by side, the Hafs and the Warsh, the Hafs and the Kalun, the Hafs and the Kunbal. We were just showing differences, huge differences. We had about 70 out of... Now, listen, since that time, Hatun and her team have found 93,000 differences. 93,000 differences. She now has 37 of these different Qurans. There are 30 that are considered to be standard, or there are 30 that are now supposedly are the standard 10. You have the 10, which are the readers, and they are Nafi and Ibn Kathir and Abu Amir and Ibn Abi al-Dimashq and Asim Ibn Abi, excuse me for my pronunciation, Hamza al-Zalyat and al-Kisa and Abu Jafar and Yaqub al-Yamami and also Khalif. Those are the 10. Those are the 10 major ones. The first 7 plus the other 3. The first 7 that Ibn Mujahid canonized in 936. Look at the date, 936. This is the 10th century. So those are the first 7 that were canonized by Ibn Mujahid. Now, another 3 were then added by al-Jazari and he died in 1429. So you're talking the 15th century. Another 3 were added. But with each one of these 10, there are 2 narrators or 2 transmitters. And it's the 2 transmitters, which makes another 20, that gives you 30. So that's how you get 30 of these qira'at. Not 1, not 2, but 30 of them. Where is Hafs in all this? And who is Hafs? We might want to come back to that at another time. But you can then understand why our good friend Mohammed Hijab had to ask this question a week ago. He was having this problem back in 2016, and he was hoping, and he was really hoping, that our Yasir Qadhi, who is a world-renowned scholar who has a PhD in the Qur'an, has done all this work, is well-known all over the internet, has an enormous amount of following in the internet, not as big as you, but certainly in the Muslim world, he is one of the best. And he wanted to come and ask this question, a simple question.
And by the way, this is very common amongst Muslims, that they think that, well, even if I couldn't answer this question, my leader could, or a scholar could, right? That is their attitude. That was always like even way back when I was talking to Nabil, that was his attitude. Even if he would get stumped, I do not know how to answer that, he would have complete confidence that there is a solution, that if he just gets the right Muslim scholar to ask him about it, then he can fix those doubts. And on this issue right here, because you posted, that was posted back in 2016, I posted a clip of you guys showing the 26 Qurans back then, and it had it got like 1.2 million views on my channel. But watching the Muslim responses, it was all, the first response is, guys, you're so stupid, those are different translations. And I got that from hundreds of Muslims sending me messages. You idiot, those are different translations. So you have to explain, no, those are different Arabic Qurans. And then the next response is, oh, but those are just differences in pronunciation. And you got to, no, they're actually differences in the text. And then the response is, no, these are just for different dialects. And no, there's something else, right? And they're going down the list. And then it's, well, why don't you debate Zakir Naik on this issue or something like that, right? They really believe that if you get the right guy, if you get the right Muslim scholar and sit him down, he can clarify all this and show you that your doubts are silly. Right, and so you're right. Mohammed Hijab gets Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, and Sheikh Qadhi, we're going to ask you, and you're going to fix all these problems, and all of a sudden Hijab has to realize, whoa, this is not going the way I wanted it to.
And are we going to play any clips? Are we going to look at them?
We can look at some clips. We can look at some clips.
Maybe why don't we just look at some clips and then unpack what's going on here? Because it's amazing, not just the body language, but what he is saying. And he's saying an awful lot more than he should have said, because you and I know that this is going on in the Muslim world, but the vast majority of those who are watching this will not see this. You will probably not even pick it up. But you will need to understand, you need to see that this is a real clash, but this was also such a clash that you can see that Yasir Qadhi is struggling to shut this down. As David said earlier, he's struggling to shut this down because he doesn't want to take it. And what does he do? All the way through, just take my class. Just take my class. I can't tell you now. I can't do it into the camera. But if you take my class, everything will be explained. So let's go show some of these clips.
Yeah.
And let's see exactly how they dealt with this material.
And that was the main complaint, because you had the Muslims who are saying, hey, you're shaking my faith here. You're shaking my faith. You had the Muslims who are saying that. But then even the Muslims who weren't saying that said, in effect, Yasir Qadhi, you raised all these doubts and said there are all these problems, and then you offered no solution to any of the problems. So you just left people with doubts and problems. That's all you did. Why did you say anything? Because he could have just said, I don't want to talk about this, and not said anything. But he says a lot more than that. So this is actually still, I would have played my own compilation, but unfortunately, Sheikh Yasir Qadhi had it removed. He might have this video removed through copyright takedown for just posting these clips. I don't know. He seems to be on a rampage to remove content. But this is actually the first video that sort of brought this to everyone's attention from Islam Critiqued. From the Islam Critiqued YouTube channel, and he posted a short compilation of these clips. We'll watch probably half of it, then stop it to discuss it a little bit, and then we'll watch the rest. So, all right, here we go. Let's see. Mohammed Hijab interviewing Sheikh Yasir Qadhi.
Every single student of knowledge knows who studies ulum al-Qur'an that the most difficult topics are ahruf and qira'at, and the concept of ahruf and the reality of ahruf and the relationship of the Uthmanic Mus'haf with the ahruf and the preservation of the ahruf. Is it 1? Is it 3? Is it 7? And the relationship of the qira'at to the ahruf. This is a topic that when you're the beginning student of knowledge, you're like, what is all of this going on here? When you go a little bit more, you learn to simply memorize what your teachers say and regurgitate it out. And you don't fully comprehend. When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult. And this isn't new. This is from the time of the Sahaba. This is not a joke, brothers and sisters. The issue of ahruf and qira'at caused confusion to somebody whom the Prophet ﷺ said, if you want to listen to the Quran directly, listen to Ubay. Ubay is not some even average Sahabi. He is the Qari of the Quran. He is the master. He is who he is. And he goes, فَدَخَلْ فِي نَفْسِي شَكْ. Like, what is all of this stuff? Again, this is you have asked me some very honest questions. It's the first time I'm saying these things. Many people are aware who listen to my lectures that I've mentioned the crises that happened to me at Yale. This was the issue. That the issue of ahruf and preservation and qira'at and relationships between them, these are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. Here's the point. These issues should only be discussed amongst people who know what the qira'at are and who understand some of these questions that are being raised.
So is what you're saying the shak that came, or not the shak, but the crisis that you...
That's a good spot to pause it right there, and then we'll go back and continue. But yep, I do not believe that was the answer that Muhammad Hijab was expecting. Could you go ahead and explain this to us? Yes, of course I can. There's only one Quran, perfectly preserved, right down to the letter, and yeah, there are the ahruf, and those are just some different dialects, so that's not a problem. And basically, there's no problem whatsoever here. One Quran, perfectly preserved, something along those lines. And Sheikh Yasir Qadhi just didn't go there. We have plenty more from Sheikh Yasir Qadhi. But Jay, what would you like to say about what you just heard from Sheikh Yasir Qadhi?
Yeah, this is fascinating because what you're hearing Qadhi say, this is the most difficult issue for us to have to deal with. And what he's talking about, you have to go back to these two different. This is from Al-Bukhari, Volume 6, 509, and Al-Bukhari, Volume 6, 510. So there's two different hadith here from two different periods. This is what happens to the Quran. This explains how the Quran was put together in 632. So this is the Abu Bakr Quran. And this is the one that explains how the Quran was then redone in 652, roughly 20 years later under Uthman. So this is Abu Bakr, this is Uthman, 2 pages apart. And this is what all Muslims have to go to know how the Quran was compiled. And what Yasir Qadhi is saying, when you go back here, you will notice that at the very beginning, Muhammad had died. He died in 632. The Quran had not yet been compiled. There was no Quran. It had been memorized by many of the Sahaba, and there was parts of it that had been put on stone, bone, and pieces of bark, and things like that. But it had not been written in any codified form. In 632 to 633, there was a battle called the Battle of Yamama, when about 70 of those who had memorized it were killed. And so this became a crisis for Abu Bakr and Umar. Abu Bakr was the caliph at that time. And they realized that if any more people died, they wouldn't have any Quran for them to go on, because you need to have people who had memorized it to retain it, to preserve it. So they called Zayd ibn Thabit. Now, David, who is Zayd ibn Thabit? Well, he's the secretary of Muhammad, right?
That's the man. Oh, but by the way, I wanted to just give you a quotation on that, just in case anyone's doubting what you just said about the people dying in battle. This is, I'll give the quotation here, and then Jay can continue. Ibn Abi Dawud's Kitab al-Masahif. Many of the passages of the Quran that were sent down were known by those who died on the day of Yamama, but they were not known by those who survived them, nor were they written down, nor had Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman by that time collected the Quran, nor were they found with even one person after them. Now Muslims, do you realize what they just said? Many of the passages of the Quran that were sent down through Muhammad, were known by those who died on the day of Yamama. So they were known by the people who died in battle. But they were not known by those who survived them. They weren't known by anyone who survived. nor were they written down. So they hadn't been written down, and no one had and there was no one alive who had them memorized. Now, guess what? If no one alive had them memorized and they weren't written down, what's that mean? It means they're gone. It means they're gone, right? Nor had Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman by that time collected the Quran. Quran had not been collected yet, nor were they found with even one person after them. Now, guys, just think about how amazing it is when you run up to us and you say, perfect preservation, right down to the letter from the time it was revealed to Muhammad. And then we start going through your sources and we found stuff like this. Yep, passages were lost. Passages were lost. And what are you Muslims going to say? Nope, everyone had, there were hundreds of people who had it memorized. It could have been lost. And we read this and it's like, you're telling us something completely different from what your sources say. Your sources say very clearly, passages were lost. They were never found again. And Jay, isn't that's the basis for collecting the Quran into a book, right? Before that, it seemed that, you know, writing these things down on like rocks and leaves and bone fragments was more like an aid to memory, right? Like you wanted to write something down on a leaf so that you could go back to your tent and memorize it, but they're focused on memorizing it and reciting it. And then it gets to the point where people are dying in battle and they're the only people who have passages memorized. And wow, we don't have those passages written down anymore. We don't have a copy of those. Hey, we need a book form. So now we need to change the emphasis to having this in an actual book so that as we die, we don't lose more. And the reason this is amazing is every Muslim tells me, well, it doesn't matter if you have all these different versions of the Quran and you have all these Qur'an and so on, because there are so many millions of Muslims who have the Quran perfectly memorized. If you go back to the beginning, they seem to realize that is a really, really, really bad way of preserving a text. And so they said, look, we need one copy. We need one copy right now. So Abu Bakr made sure they had one copy so that as people die, there's a Chinese proverb that says, I think it's the weakest ink will outlast the strongest memory. And they had to find that out the hard way. Go ahead.
And this is very great that you bring it up, because there's an awful lot of Muslims that say, well, yes, they all memorized it. That's all they needed was the memorization. It's obvious to Abu Bakr and Umar the memory wasn't good enough. This caused the crisis so much so, and we know that 70 were killed at the Battle of Yama. If just 70 dying caused this kind of crisis, that they had to have it written down, that suggests that memory isn't good enough. And we all know that. Literally, that's a no-brainer. So here they have, back in 632, they put together this one copy. Zayd ibn Thabit does it all by himself. He gives it to Abu Bakr, who gives it to Umar, who gives it to his daughter, who is the widow of Muhammad. Her name is Hafsa. And what does she do with it? Well, she sticks it under her bed. Rather a stupid idea to stick it under your bed. Why would you put it under your bed if this is the only copy you've got? If this is the one and only copy you got, it stays there for 20 years. Let's now jump to this one here. And this is where Yasir Qadhi, and this is where Shabir Ali, back on May 19th, came apart. Because this is not the first person that came up with the video. Shabir Ali came up with the video on May 19th, where he tried to help us unpack this part. The Uthmanic recension, the second Quran. This is the second Quran. And there was a problem by Hudayfa. Hudayfa says, listen, there's all these people in the Shams. Shams means the people in the north. Shams means the people in Syria and Iraq. Hold on to that. We're going to come back to that. These people who are up here in the north, they are not reciting it the same way. And we're going to have a problem like the Christians and Jews have. We're going to have many different books. Therefore, we need to get one final copy. So Uthman gets Zayd ibn Thabit, wakes him up after 20 years, and he says, okay, I want to give you 3 other guys, Zubair, Alas, and Harith, and the 4 of you are going to rewrite this Quran again. Go and wake up Hafsa, get her copy, get it from under her bed, and then take that copy, and notice what he says next. You must write it in the Qurayshi dialect. So here is a dialect called the Quraysh. What is the Qurayshi dialect? This is the Qurayshi dialect that Muhammad would have used. This is the dialect that he would have spoken in Mecca and Medina, the Hijaz, the central part of Arabia. Not the Shams, not Syria, not Iraq. This is supposed to be the Qurayshi dialect of Mecca. Am I correct?
Yep.
Pretty obvious to me. Well, let me ask you this, David. How do you write a dialectical form? How do you write a dialect in a consonantal text? Because remember, the Arabic is only consonantal. It doesn't have any vowels. Those were added much, much later. The Dhamma, the Kasra, the Fatha. How do you write a consonantal text in a dialectical form if there's no dots? There were no dots in the 7th century. So what does this mean? Does this make any sense to you?
Never has, and I think that's what Shabir acknowledged at the story of the Ahruf. He says yeah, this could refer to dialects and so on, but he says but Muslim scholars can't agree on what this means. That's the same thing Sheikh Qadhi says, even going back to his book on the sciences of the Quran, that Muslims have all these different theories. And even in the interview with Hijab there, he said Muslims have all these theories, and some of them can explain more than others, but none of them can answer these pressing questions that are coming from outside the fold of Islam. But basically, no one knows what they mean. That they have and matter of fact, this is a perfect example of what he's talking about when he says that here in Islam, we see an issue and we push a little bit, and then we give an answer, and then when we get an answer, we say, okay, that's good. He goes, the non-Muslims, they don't have that red line. He says they just
line.
Yeah.
We haven't come to that yet.
Yeah.
I was going to hold on to the red line because that's the best thing I've heard yet. But hold on. Let's don't jump on it because that's going to come up in the next clip that you're going to show.
And here I just mean that he's breaking it down that they will just keep asking questions, and so the Muslim response is, a Muslim hears, oh no, there are these different ahruf. What is that? What could that be? And then the explanation comes. Oh, you see, it's just differences. It's just differences in dialect. And the Muslim said, "Oh, okay. See, that's good. That's good because I believe
that's all he needs.
That's good enough for me." But if you were to bring that up in a non-Islamic context, they're going to push back. What are you talking about? They're going to say the stuff you're just saying. What are you talking about? Yeah, go ahead.
You're jumping ahead, and you're coming up with some of the choicest material that we're yet to unpack. But let's hold off because we want to hear Qadhi say that, because what Qadhi says is absolutely informative. But anyways, here we are. We're back, and they're saying write it in the quotation dialect. I'm making a point about this because you're going to see what and who Hafs is. You're going to see the one that they did choose is the wrong one, nonetheless. So they do this, and they write it up, and they get it finally in one codified form, and then they send it out to all the provinces. Now, according to tradition, as long as I've been studying it, we've always talked about only 4 cities: Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, and Medina. Those are the 4. And we have 4 different people that were the reciters that actually were responsible. Ubay ibn Ka'b, that's what he's talking about. Remember he said Ubay ibn Ka'b? Mm-hmm. Ubay, he was the best. He was up in Damascus. His was the best. You have Ibn Masud, who is in Baghdad. You have Ibn Musa, who is in Basra. And you have Zayd ibn Thabit, who is in Medina. So those are the 4 men who go with the reciters, who are the ones responsible for these 4 different codices. But that's not what it says in Sahih. It's not what it says in Sahih Bukhari. Read it again. It says to every province. There were more than 4 provinces. Let me name them: Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Alexandria, Aden, Herat, and Nishapur. How many did I just do? That's 9. There were actually 9 provinces. So whether it's 4 or 9, I would like to find that one, even one of those 4. I would like to know where that one of those 4 that was in Basra, Baghdad, or in Damascus, or in Medina. Give me even one of those 4, because I would like to know exactly what was written there. What we do know is that immediately after he did this and sent them out to the provinces, he took all the remaining manuscripts. Hold on a minute. I thought these were recitations. Recitations aren't manuscripts. Recitation is something you do with your mouth. Recitation, a dialect, is how you pronounce it. You can read the text, the consonant, but you pronounce it different if you're in Morocco than the way you pronounce it in Cairo, and different than the way you do it in Jordan. And depending on where you are, what you see in the text and how you pronounce it are 2 different things. So how can you then take manuscripts and burn them? This is exactly what he did. He burned manuscripts, not people's tongues, not people's recitations. So that's where Shabir Ali got it completely wrong, because he was trying to say that these were recitations that were different. That's why they had to put it into one dialect. The difficulty even with that is there was no way that you could have it in a dialectical form in the 7th century. The dots had yet to be invented. Those were created in the early 8th century into the mid-8th century, canonized in the late 8th century. And once you had all these dots, once you had these dots above and below the lines, and remember, there are 28 letters in the Arab alphabet. There are about 15 that are unique, but there are 6 that don't need any dots. All the other ones need dots to know what you're talking about. So if you have just one little curly face or smiley face, if you put a dot above it, it becomes a na. 2 dots above it becomes a ta. 3 dots above it becomes a tha. 1 dot below it becomes a ba. 2 dots a ya. Na, ta, tha, ba, ya. You can get 5 different letters just by putting the dots above and below the lines. Can you then understand that when you also get a whole proliferation of these dots, then you have a proliferation of different words, do you not? And that's why when you start getting the dots and start to make these dialectical differences, you're going to have many different variations on where those dots go. If you just take three little words, three letters together, not words, just three letters together, and put dots above and below the line, you can get anywhere from 19 to 33 words, just from three letters put together. Can you then understand then why this became a real dilemma in the late 8th century? And why then they needed to find out where they're going to put these dots, how are they going to put the vowels, because then the vowels were invented. That's the dhamma, the u sound. That's the kasra, the e sound. That's the fatta, that's the a sound. There are only three vowels, short vowels, and they're elongated as well. Those three vowels were invented in the 8th, possibly the 9th century. Once they had the vowels in place, then you could put them all over the place, and you get many, many different variations. And that's where the problem with qira'at comes. The qira'at comes in which school, which reader, which one are you going to follow? Which set of dots and vowels are you going to follow? And that's why we now have first 7, and then 3 more, which is 10, and then another 20, which makes 30, that were then came into existence by the time of the 15th century. But this is fascinating because what we have been told and what they all tell you is that this all happened in the time of Muhammad.
When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult.